So today we will be reviewing Roadwork by Stephen King. By way of introduction, I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press, and this is my video review channel where I am reviewing all the Stephen King novels in publication order. We have reached Roadwork. As you know, if you've been following this video series of Stephen King reviews, I am reading along in the novel to the Audible.com version. The Audible.com version was narrated this time by a fellow named G. Valmont Thomas. He did a good job. I have no complaints on the Audible narration. Audible usually hires very good voice actors. No complaints for Roadwork. Now let's get to the review of Roadwork itself. This, as you know, is one of the Bachman books, one of the books that Stephen King wrote under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman. You can see some of the Bachman books up here. I've got hardcovers, paperbacks. He wrote a series of books in the 1970s, Rage, The Long Walk, Roadwork, and The Running Man, all under the pseudonym Richard Bachman before people figured out it was Stephen King. This is the one we're doing now, Roadwork. One of the things I've noticed about these Bachman books, and I guess this is maybe one of the reasons Stephen King wrote under a pseudonym for these books, is there's no supernatural stuff in any of these. There's no horror. There's no horror. You know, Stephen King's known as a horror novel. The Bachman books, there's no horror. You know, in The Long Walk, it was just a long walk, kids walking. In Roadwork, in Rage, the book Rage, which I will not review on this channel out of respect for Stephen King, because it's the one book that he said he'd wished he'd never written. If you want to know why, Google that and find out. You'll understand why he wished he'd never written it and why I will not review it. But that novel was also not a horror novel per se. It had no supernatural elements. The Running Man, not a horror novel. I'll be reviewing The Running Man here in probably a month or two when that falls into the line of publication order. Roadwork, again, not a supernatural horror novel. More of a thriller, more of kind of like when I reviewed The Dead Zone. Roadwork is kind of more of a literary piece of fiction, in my opinion. I did like it. I remember reading this once back in the day when I read all of these Bachman books. The only Bachman book that I've read multiple times was The Long Walk. The rest of them I just read once. I remember reading this once and finding it to be very forgettable. Thus, I forgot everything about it. So, rereading it for this series of reviews was kind of refreshing, because I was going into it, as if it was a new Stephen King novel for me, and I found I really quite enjoyed Roadwork. The basic plot of Roadwork. There's a fellow named George Dawes. He owns a home. He's a family man. He goes to work at his job at the laundromat. Well, it turns out that the city and the state wants to build a road where his house is and where his work is. So through public domain and eminent domain and all that stuff, they get the property and they've got plans to take out his workplace and his home. Well, he does not like that. One of the reasons he does not like that is because the home means a lot to him. His son, who passed away at a very young age from cancer, that was the only home that his son had ever lived in, so he's got a special place in his heart for that home. He does not want to see it bulldozed for a freeway. That's the basis of the plot. Another thing is he loves his job at the laundromat. And they're gonna bulldoze that too. So he's losing everything. And in the midst of all this controversy of the government taking possession of his home and his workplace to bulldoze and put a freeway, he loses his marriage in that process. So that's another blow to him. He's lost his son, he's lost his marriage, and now he's going to lose his home and work due to this freeway that they're building. One of the things I realized about this novel and about a short story Stephen King wrote that I've already reviewed in Night Shift, the Mangler. Well, he works in a laundromat, and there's actually, and I didn't get this correlation when I reviewed the Mangler. There's a piece of equipment in the laundromat actually called a mangle. Now, the mangle is an industrial piece of equipment that presses and folds laundry real quick. And if you've read the Mangler, you know that people get sucked into the Mangler and they get pressed and folded real quick. And it's kind of a gruesome story. But you know, Stephen King subtly did not mention that in the Mangler, that there's actually a piece of laundry equipment called a mangle. And I guess if you don't work in the laundry business, you would not have known that. I figured it out rereading this book, and George works in a laundromat with the mangle. Thus, Stephen King got the idea for the Mangler. I don't know which one came first. I think I don't know if this story or the Mangler came first. Either way, I think it was the Mangler that came first, and then this. Either way, it was just a kind of an interesting thing. So the basis of the story, we've already discussed that. Why did Stephen King write this? What happens in the story is George is very upset that his house is going to be destroyed. So he sets out to sabotage the building of this freeway. And, you know, that's kind of what happens. He meets a series after series of different characters that he meets in his quest to sort of sabotage the freeway, the building of the freeway, and delay it and perhaps halt it completely. He meets gangsters, and he goes and buys guns and weapons from different people. And it's kind of like a series of different people that he runs into. One of the ones that I thought was, and I don't know if this was a necessary thing to add into the story or not, but it was the one character that he meets that captivated my attention, and I was riveted to the story while this character was there. And that's Olivia, the young hitchhiker that he just picks up and gets in his car. And it's kind of like an old man's fantasy where you pick up, because George is in middle ages, in his 40s, and he picks up this young 20-year-old hitchhiker girl out of nowhere. And, you know, it kind of devolves into this weird old man's fantasy of the young girl just, you know, liking him immediately and all this and that and the other. But I was interested. Maybe it's because I'm a middle-aged guy. I don't know. But he just meets quirky characters like this, George, in his quest to destroy this freeway. I won't give away the ending or what. These are always spoiler-free, so you can read the story to figure out if he succeeds in stalling the freeway, or if the freeway actually, if they bulldoze his house and whatnot. Why did Stephen King write this? He calls it one of his favorite stories that he's ever written. I think he's written a lot better stuff than this, that's for sure. But he calls this one of his favorite, and it's definitely his favorite Bachman book. I think there are a couple other Bachman. I think all the Bachman books are actually better than this one, though I do think this one's quite good. He said he wrote this. His own mother died of cancer, and he wrote this shortly thereafter as kind of a therapeutic session for himself. And I get that. I'm a writer too, and when we put our own therapy in words in our stories, whether we think we're doing it or not. And I applaud Stephen King for writing this book as a therapy session for himself at the death of his mother. So good for that. I actually really quite liked the book a lot, coming into it fresh. Having read it a long time ago and forgetting everything about it, coming to it fresh this time was great. I rate books 1 through 10. I give this a solid 7. I think people will enjoy it for the quirky sort of adventure that it is. Solid 7 out of 10. I liked rereading this. That's my final review of it. Once again, I end every video with this bit of news. I dedicate every novel I write, whether it's Forgetting Moon, Blackest Heart, Lonesome Crown. I dedicate all of them to Stephen King, Motley Crue, and the Oakland Raiders, because those were the 3 most important things to me as a kid growing up. And so they get a shout out in every book that I ever write. And so here's the thing, 7 out of 10 for Roadwork. Go ahead and get Roadwork by Stephen King, one of the original Bachman books. You will enjoy it. I enjoyed it. Thank you.